Today we talk with Josh Bachynski, an SEO whiz and philosopher. Maybe the saviour of our world? I think I'll leave that for you to decide.
The method, we're eating and sleeping or fight. The method, for a marriage or divorce or one night. Well, I know you probably think that sounds pretty dumb, but the method's used to get shit done. If you're chatting up a lover, you're going on a run, then it might be wise to heed the words of a pro with a little bit of help. Who knows, to get some happiness out of your woes, to get promoted, see your happy mind inside your head. You don't want to wake up dead, thinking why'd you work so hard for things that hardly worked for you. The method works.
Welcome to the show and everything. How are you?
I'm doing great, guys. Thanks for having me on.
I'll ask you again. I know we asked before we click record, but you know, it's formal.
Yes, you have to get that obligatory "How are you?" at the beginning, top of the show.
And so you work in SEO, right?
Yes, that's what pays the bills.
I'm sure quite a lot of people won't know what SEO is. So in the most simple terms, could you describe what SEO is and how that's making money for you?
Sure. So SEO stands for Search Engine Optimization. The short form of it is I reverse engineer Google's algorithms, their search algorithms, to find out what they're using to rank pages. And I have a mentorship group where people pay me for that information. And I teach them how to edit their web pages and what they should be doing and whatnot. And it's mostly small businesses, mom and pops who pay me. Because Google right now, sadly, prioritizes big brands. And so mom and pops basically don't have a voice on Google. And so it's interesting. It's one way that Google is censoring the internet and doing really naughty things that nobody really pays attention to. Everyone pays attention to their stealing our data and then sledding out our data to all the top marketing and digital companies. As everybody knows, oil is now the second most lucrative commodity. Data is the most lucrative commodity on the planet currently, and that's your data, your digital personality, if you will. And they literally slept that out to sell to you better. But they don't realize that Google also for over 10 years has been censoring the internet. They censor about 99.9% of the internet, including small mom and pops and small businesses that they just don't think in their infinite wisdom are a good enough business compared to big brands. And so it really is a terrible thing. And so I don't like to paint myself as a Robin Hood character. I'm definitely making money off this, don't get me wrong. But you know, it is really a terrible thing that people need to pay these kinds of services to be able to be seen on Google.
So to improve your SEO, I'm sure it's a whole host of things, but I don't really understand it at all, but how I've sort of come to understand small parts of it, is it things like keywords and branding and like the content you include on your front page and stuff like that, or is it I'm sure it goes quite a lot deeper than that as well.
It does these days. It's rather fascinating. Google is, I mean, you know, love them or hate them, they are some of the most brilliant programmers on the planet. Google has poached the double PhDs with postdocs. Like, these are highly educated, high IQ, like the most brilliant programmers on the planet. Google has gone around the world and poached them, a lot from India, and poached these guys and gals. And they have built the most impressive artificial intelligence that the human species has ever made to date. They've made all of them. They've made the AI that beat poker players. Their AI their artificial intelligence is built into search. And so it's so far beyond keywords at this point. It's so far beyond what you say on your page. I mean, it is related to what you say on your page. But here's another little secret that nobody knows that Google does, is that they track every single web page that you click. They track every single place that you go to. Every modern browser reports your whereabouts to Google through something called I always get this mixed up. It's either the safe browse, the safe search. It's the anti-malware database that they've been running for years. So if you ever have run up to a URL and you got this big red screen and said, "Hey, don't go here, this is malware," you guys ever seen that screen?
Yeah.
Google has run that screen since the beginning. They have run that database of all the malware under the auspices of all doing us all a favor. But the secret reason why they've been doing it for the last 2 decades is because now they get to track where every IP address, every computer address goes to every web page and how long it goes there. to make sure you're not going to a malware URL, your computer is sending packets, your computer is sending information to this malware database. It compares where you want to go to what are malware sites. And if you have a malware site, it says, hey, you can't go there, and stops you. Or if you aren't going to a malware site, it lets you through, and then you finally get to see the information. And that's been going on for over a decade. So Google tracks, even if you're in incognito mode, even whether you're logged in or not, Google tracks where every computer goes to every other server on the web. And they censor, of course, vast amounts of the internet they censor. They're not a search engine, they're a censorship engine, really, at the end of the day when it comes down to it. And not a lot of people know that. They think that if they're in incognito mode and they're being naughty and viewing whatever information, that Google's not tracking you. No, Google is tracking you, and that's part of your digital profile that all the FANG have access to. Do you guys know what the FANG is? The FANG is the richest companies in the world these days. Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google. And they all sell, these are the guys who buy and sell and trade all of your digital profiles. And that's how they know how well to sell to you. They know they're using Bernaysian psychological tactics adopted from Bernays' uncle, Sigmund Freud, from the turn of the 20th century up till now. They're using these tactics, the most advanced psychological tactics, to get people to buy whatever they want, and they are exceedingly good at it.
So, but you're saying Google prefers bigger companies. Well, why would this be? Just because they're paying them more, or? That's a beautiful question, William. So, yes, and there's a direct quote from he's not the CEO of Google anymore, but he was for many years. He took the helm of Google from Larry Page and Sergey Brin when Larry Page was kind of running the company into the ground and not making as much money as they saw that this company could make. And his name is Eric Schmidt. And Eric Schmidt was quoted as saying, and this is a direct quote, "Brands are not the problem, brands are the solution. Brands are how you clear out the cesspool of the internet," end quote. So they made the conscious decision, and you can look that up, that's a direct quote. So they made the conscious decision that they're going to screw mom and pops, they're going to screw small businesses, and then by de facto standard, they're screwing people of color, they're screwing the economically impoverished, because statistically that's how that runs, right? They're screwing all those groups over so that the old boys club of capitalism, the old boys club of the big corporations will get a break in Google, and then they'll give Google a break in return, right? It's simply, quite frankly, it's all the supremacies in one. It's white supremacy, it's rich supremacy, and quite frankly, it's American supremacy, all wrapped up into one. And that's welcome to capitalism, folks. That's end stage capitalism, and that's how that works.
Basically, what Google's sort of main goal is to track as much of everything that we do all over the internet, and just basically turn that into money by selling that to bigger brands.
Precisely. That's exactly what their job is. All the other ventures Google has started, Google Glasses, do you guys remember Google Driving, all the medical stuff? None of that has made any money at all. Maybe 100 million here, 100 million there, which is nothing for Google. They make hundreds of billions of dollars of profit a year, and the engine that has done that for them ever since the beginning has been and always has been Google Search. And if you're wondering, well, how does Google make the money? Google's free to use. I have news for you. One, Google is not free to use at all. You pay for it. We pay for it. I pay for it. You pay for it. We all pay for Google. I'll explain how in a second. Same with Facebook. Facebook is not free to use either, by the way. Only a fool thinks this. And this is the most insidious kind of thing that people don't realize. But yeah, so let me explain that point. So how is Google not free to use? Well, Google makes all their money on the ads that appear on the page. And slowly and surely, it used to be one ad 20 years ago. Now it's 2 ads. Now it's 3 ads. Now you get Google organic pages that it's just all ads, and there's one organic result. The organic result is the so-called free result of the actual internet. All the ads are what people are paying to have there and to be there. And how does that work? Well, they work on a bidding system. So let's say I want to show up for drums. So I see a drum kit behind you. Let's say I want to show up for drum kits. I have custom drum kits that I make, and I want for people to find me on Google. Well, no way. No, there's no way I'm competing with all the official brands of drums to get my custom drum kits on Google. So now I have to go into Google and I have to pay them, and I have to pay them per click or per visitor. And so I would make a bid, a secret bid, and I'm bidding against all the other people who want to bid on drum kits, including the huge drum companies. And and this naturally drives up the prices of bids over time. So I'll bid $3 to be there. They'll bid $5. They'll show up, whatever that is, 20% more. Then I bid $5 and they bid $10, and I'm still showing up 50% less because they bid double what I bid, right? And so it goes on and on and on like that. Some clicks in Google AdWords are up to $100 or $200 US a click per visitor. $100 or $200. Now, that's how that works, and that's how Google makes all their money. 95% of the money, that's how they make it. And Google is the majority search for the West. 95% of the people in the West, from Europe all the way over to Hawaii, that side of the planet, uses Google. Now, you're like, well, what do I care, Josh? Well, one, that's killing all the small businesses and mom and pops. So good luck them ever being seen or having any digital business. Two, you have to pay for that. We all pay for this, right? And you're like, well, how? Well, let me ask you this. Do you think the CEOs and shareholders of these companies are going to graciously give Google $100 a click and not roll that into their prices somewhere that we have to pay for it down the line? Like, do you think the CEOs and shareholders are going, oh, well, wow, Google, you outmaneuvered us. You brilliant Google, you. Well, very well. Here is your cut, Google. Here's your Google tax. We shan't complain at all. Like, no, of course not, right? That's not what they do. And so they roll the prices for us to pay down the line. And whether you used Google or not, whether you walked into that brick and mortar store or you bought something on Google, you're still paying the Google tax because the business needs to pay the Google tax. Because gray hairs in Washington are too stupid and too old to realize that that digital is a thing now. The internet is a thing now. No one uses the phone anymore. Like, I don't know what century these people think they're living in. No one uses a phone anymore. Everyone touches Google in the buying cycle process. You all type in best drum kit, best sleep apnea device, best, everyone does a search for a review first, right? That touches Google. Google gets to tell you what to buy at that point. And then the cycle continues. And so that cost is wrapped in, and it's a Google tax. Literally, Google owns the city that we all live in, and they make us charge a surtax every time we make a move in that city. And the city is called the internet, but we don't have access to the internet anymore. There is no internet anymore. There's Facebook, there's Amazon, and there's Google, and there's Netflix. That's the internet. And that's, if you remember back in the 90s, the internet was this free thing where anyone could make a web page. Yeah, well, big deal. You can make a web page, but nobody will ever find it because Facebook algorithms won't share it if it's not, something uberly political these days or something. Google's not going to let you see it because they censored it. And then Amazon is not going to let you see it because they want you to buy on Amazon. And Netflix is taking up all your time anyway. So you don't get to see this thing, right? So we really are digitally speaking, we really are in a bad state. It is end stage capitalism, and it is having some real world problems. And what's going to happen is, it's digital Walmart. How Walmart moves into a town and jacks down the prices, and everyone goes out of business, and then it can safely ramp up the prices, and you have no selection. You have to buy what Walmart buys, which they get all from China, which is crappy, stuff and whatever, blah 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 blah. The cheapest stuff they can possibly buy, and for the greatest cost. It's just a matter of time before that happens because of the digital Walmart of the internet, which is Google. Just because it sounds like a conspiracy theory, it doesn't mean it's not true.
I think people would generally see, like, particularly Google, but some of the, not Amazon, but particularly Google and maybe Facebook as being, particularly Google, as being like made up of people with quite libertarian left-wing views,
mm-hmm.
and maybe that even being the problem sometimes, but often these people are like quite socialist in their outlook in life, but yet you're saying that at the same time they kind of hold a cognitive bias, saying cognitive dissonance, even saying that they're against these smaller companies and therefore against minority groups who maybe are represented by the smaller companies and are going actually for the benefit of the larger companies and the benefit of the people who have always been in power. How can they hold this in your mind, this cognitive bias?
Oh, in the way every modern corporation in stage capitalism does, by completely bald-faced lying, knowingly completely bald-faced lying. It's quite fascinating. So my PhD is in philosophy, PhD ABD, mostly philosophy, a little bit of neuroscience and psychology. So I studied the ancient Greeks. I had the pleasure of studying the ancient Greeks. One of my professors made me read Plato's Republic and a bunch of other stuff. And I'm like, I don't want to read this. And he's like, read it. So I read it. And it blew my mind how like the Athenian democracy we are in one key way, where the rich bald-facedly said, the best way to be rich and to own a lot of slaves and to own the town is to appear congenial and good in public, but be the most ruthless, backstabbing bastard in private. That was the modus operandi of the Athenian nobility, to appear as congenial and good in public, but again, be Game of Thrones ruthless behind the scenes. And that is exactly how the rich have always acted throughout history. That is the modus operandi of the rich, and that is the modus operandi of our ruling corporatocracy. They appear to be congenial. They make mottos like "Don't be evil," right? But at the same time, no matter how much Google believed in that philosophy at the beginning, when you get money and shareholders involved, invariably it always boils down to the dollars rule. And they have to appear congenial. That's why they have propaganda. That's why they have propaganda departments called public relations. Again, a term that was directly coined by Edward Bernays at the turn of the 20th century. If your listeners out there haven't watched The Century of the Self, I highly recommend you go watch the documentary The Century of the Self. It's on YouTube. It's free. That tells you in just a single documentary, that gets you to understand what kind of dystopia we're living in right now. This sales dystopia, where they single-handedly turned the culture from a needs-based culture, we only buy what we need, to a wants-based culture. We buy what we want, and they inflame our desires completely to make men think they need beard oil and women need to shave their armpits, and that cigarettes are good for you. They just ramp it up more and more and more. So this has been the modus operandi of corporations forever, but amplified ever since Bernays in the 20th and 21st century. And think of it: the lead industry, the cigarette industry, the alcohol industry, the oil industry. They all lie in your face when they know 20 years earlier that their products are killing you. Google lies to their employees. Google lies to us, saying they're these kind of bastions of liberalism. Same with Facebook, but they're committing the same sin in two different ways, on two different extremes. On the one extreme, Google will police information, and they will police searches, and they will police what you can find based on their liberal Silicon Valley, white supremacy, rich supremacy, American supremacy bent. And the other way, Facebook has decided not to do that at all because they don't want to get rid of the Russian advertising dollars from propaganda. So they decided they're not going to police free speech at all. They're going to just let that all go, and then let those mind bubbles of the left and the right completely bifurcate and thus destroy us. Because I've got a news flash. If a social group or a work group can't even agree on what's true, they cannot work together. That's impossible. Like, we don't even have the same truths. Have you ever? Well, you guys are in the UK, I'm assuming, so you might not have experienced this. Actually, you probably have, because the UK is just as bad as North America at this point. Have you ever had a family dinner with someone who, an old uncle or someone from the other side, and you're like, well, that Trump was impeached, and they're like, what do you mean? They haven't even heard it. Like they're playing with completely different truths. Like, the facts are totally different. They think coronavirus is a hoax, and we're like, are you insane? Of course it's not a hoax. It's 3 million people on the planet have got it or died from it or whatever it is, whatever the ridiculous, and it's not a hoax. But truth has become politicized, and there's actually a very fascinating philosophical reason why that is. That's so mind-blowingly conspiracy theory that if you guys want to hear it, I'll blow your minds. But the left and right are so. I'm trying to finish this point off. I'm trying to finish this rant off before the next rant. So the left and right are so playing with completely different truth playbooks, and so that is again because of the FANG. The FANG exacerbates that problem, right? So what's the solution? So I did a TEDx talk in Northern Ireland, Omagh, a beautiful little town in Northern Ireland. And I said in my TEDx talk, listen, it doesn't matter that Facebook is libertarian and that Google is social democratic, science slant social democratic, because at the end of the day, they're dictatorships, right? The remedy to a dictatorship is to have a democratic vote. That is the only remedy to a dictatorship. And Facebook and Google make some moves that we would probably agree with. They're banning child porn. We'd agree with that. They remove credit cards from their system. When somebody accidentally puts their credit card online, they strip that right away, and they censor other stuff that we might agree with. But that's not the point. The point is the dictator can turn nasty at any time, and they do a lot of things that we don't agree with. And what control do we have over these basic fundamental utilities? Facebook and Google are basic fundamental utilities on the internet. If you don't have Facebook, you can't get a job or have any friends. If you don't have Google, what you're going to use Bing, which is just as bad, by the way. Just Microsoft, is equally as evil a corporation, I assure you. So these are basic utilities that we have no political control over. We have no political vote over. We can't vote in the rights for what the searcher rights are on Google or Facebook. And this is a huge, huge problem because now it's been privatized. It's like, imagine if the police were privatized. Well, the police are bad enough already, but imagine if the police were privatized and you had no say over how they operated. And, let's say, can you only imagine like the Google spokesperson coming up and saying, whoops, well, sadly, we had a malfunction in a private police officer's weapon, and it sadly discharged, and a person of color was murdered. We're so sorry. We'll try to improve our terms of service. The police force might be down next Friday as we reboot them. Like, that's literally where we are right now with Google controlling what they control. And so, again, that's a huge problem that we're going to have to fix.
Can you explain further what you mean by end stage capitalism and like where we are and maybe a little bit of how we got there in your eyes?
Sure, of course. So, I mean, it's a pretty standard term. End-stage capitalism, as the concept runs, as I understand it, is that capitalism starts off as this anarchic, free system, fair, free system in the beginning. When you start monopoly and you press go, everyone has the same amount of $0 or whatever it is. But over time, power accrues to the largest corporations so that they can work outside the system. And the bigger corporations can gobble up smaller corporations and gain so much momentum that smaller players can never meet them. And so the supposed fairness in this system doesn't work the way that they say it does because of monopolies can start. And monopolies can influence politics. And so unless you have a political system which is extremely strong and resistant to corporate interests or corporate influence, they will completely buy politicians, and therefore the laws won't affect them at that point, right? So and then because little chunks of the politeia, to use the Greek, little chunks of the political system are being moved over to these monopolies, then statistically over time, your rights start to be given and granted by these corptocracies. Just as we're seeing now, our digital rights are granted to us by Facebook and by Google, as opposed to our elected officials, the way it's supposed to be. And so it's an insidious form of slavery. It's a hidden form of slavery. It doesn't fix the slavery problem. Everyone's not equal and everyone's not free. It creates wage slaves and digital corptocracies, which are now the plantation owners, which are owning people. They literally own our digital copies. And they own us in the sense of, like, the pejorative sense, in that they know exactly what we're going to buy, and they're psychologically very good at making us buy what it is they want us to buy. And they literally think, well, if you're too dumb not to think outside of our box, then tough for you, and that's the way it's going to be. And so that's how end-stage capitalism ends up. It ends up to be a corptocracy of the rule of 3 or 4 or 5 different monopolies that are thus untouchable in the system. And the money doesn't trickle down in the way that proponents of free market capitalism say it trickles down. It gets hoarded up into the rich, and then any of it trickling down leaves the country and goes to the poorest countries, which right now it gets outsourced to India and to the Philippines. So good for India and the Philippines, and that they get to a third world country gets to benefit from what the first world countries put on the third world countries, but it doesn't stay in the first world country. And if you look at it that way, and if you think of it as homogenous, first world country, second world country, third world, that's not actually the way it truly is. Take America, for example. It's supposed to be a first world country, but that's not at all true. If I drew a map of America on the screen, huge swaths of it would be second or third world conditions. And those second and third world conditions grow to include more and more areas the further down end stage capitalism we go.
So with the larger corporations, Google, Amazon, Facebook, having so much control over what we do and what we think, what we buy, they have control over everything, really, just like you're saying. Mm-hmm. Do you see a way around it? Like, do you see a path to how this can change, or how the general public can have more freedom? Or I guess awareness is a big part of it. A lot of people aren't going to be aware of the amount of control that Google and Facebook has over them.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And that's the thorny issue, is how do you fix it? Mm-hmm. And there's no good answer. Because I can give you, in my TEDx talk, I propose a solution that could be implemented in a year and it could be done. The problem is that there's absolutely no one knows the problem. There's no political will to solve the problem. And the corporations already own all the politicians anyway, so that there will be no political will to solve the problem. The only solution for corruption, the only human solution for stupidity is education. That is the only solution. And corporations have been doing their best to dumb us down as much as possible, because the more they can make us into Homer Simpsons, to use the compared to Simpsons, the more they make us all unreasoning, brain addicted to our phone Homer Simpsons, the more they can sell to us. And that is literally in the Bernaysian playbook. So they've been making us, the reason why we saw America erode the way we have, and look at America, like, how did it possibly come to this? It's because they've been eroding education ever since the 1920s and 30s. And they've been doing that on purpose. Ever since the Second World War, they've been dumbing down that population as much as possible. And they joke about it, right? They all know they're Homer Simpsons. They all know it on some level. We all know. The planet knows it, right? And sadly, the same has been going on in Canada, although people have been trying to resist it in my beloved Canada. I don't know about your UK. I know you guys are pretty well educated, generally speaking, but I don't know if it's being dumbed down. It probably is a little bit more now after your Brexit problem. The very fact that they could bifurcate your culture the way Russia did, and the way the hostile actors did, indicates that we have an educational problem on the planet. And this is straight Plato, right? I'm not saying anything every philosopher before me hasn't said and doesn't already know. Since Plato, moving on through Cicero, Augustine, Machiavelli, Bacon, Descartes, Rousseau, Nietzsche. That line right there has been in a constant discussion of how do we educate these plebs, to what purpose and how well, right? Literally, to that degree, with the same amount of, not disdain, some of them disdain, Nietzsche disdain for sure, but other like Bacon and Machiavelli, not disdain at all. Like, they're, oh my God, the people I live with are, they're getting murdered by these other psychopaths. How do we stop this? This is knowledge is power, Bacon said. Educate yourself, for crying out loud. Machiavelli said we need to hold down Lady Fortuna and take from her what we want. And that means, and the same thing that Bacon said a century later, is that pain is the enemy. We have people dying at 20. We have no idea why. She's healthy one day, she's dead the next. Why did that happen? We need to make medical science. We need to hold down fate. Fate is not sacred, Catholic Church. We need to hold down nature and pin it down. We need to experiment. We need to make science and medical science. So that's where that modern turn comes in from there, and the philosophers are trying to help us. But what has happened, sadly, is the last great philosopher, Nietzsche, he was a bit of a cheeky bastard. And he hated you guys in the UK. He hated us over here. He thought we were smarmy gits, to use one of your phrases. And he decided that he was going to destroy the notion of truth. The Nazis picked it up and said, there's no truth. We are the strong, therefore we should rule. And they almost won. They almost caught the whole planet. I'll remind everybody. Nietzsche's attack almost won directly. But then he created concepts like culture, lifestyle, artistic coolness, for lack of a better word, and that truth is relative, right? And so that filtered through far left-wing postmodern thought, through Derrida, through Foucault, through Jean-François Lyotard, into postmodernism. Have you ever heard the word postmodernism before?
Yes.
And then postmodernism destroyed academia. They all thought there's no truth anymore. There's no genders. There's no standards. There's nothing you can appeal to. I'm not saying there are genders. I'm not saying I'm with or against this argument, by the way. Although I am definitely against the erosion of the notion of objective truth, which the last bits of it got sucked into science, and then they close the door and they don't talk to us anymore. And they have their own language. We can't even understand what the hell they're talking about. And they very infrequently deign to come out of their office and talk to us. Bill Nye the Science Guy and Neil deGrasse Tyson are the only scientists coming out to talk to us. All the rest of them are talking science talk in their science world. But they have no moral truth anymore because Nietzsche destroyed it. So the Hippocratic Oath is getting eroded. And medicine is the last place where you find kind of any morality in science. The rest of the scientists are like, yeah, we want to help people. There's kind of that highfalutin ideal. But mostly it's like whoever pays them the most money. The American government's going to pay us money. Okay, we'll make supersonic weapons that can kill people from planets away or whatever it is, So that's the solution to the problem is education, and it can't be overt education. Let me tell you why. Because corporations have that completely on lock, right? Corporations dictate what is taught in every college and every university, with very few exceptions.
And how do they do that?
Oh, very easily. They provide all the funding. They write all the textbooks. Right, and they put pressure on each university. If you have some if I was teaching at a university, I would get fired for saying all the things I've said to you if I said it too much or too loudly. Right. They'd be like, no, just teach what some idiot philosopher said. Teach what Camus said. I don't give a shit what Camus said. Camus never said anything useful or important at any time in history. But I have to teach the curriculum because the curriculums all get mandated from on high, and there's shaking of hands and transfer of money on that level, right? The only colleges that really get a pass from this are the monotheistic ones, the Hebraic colleges and the Christian colleges. But then, of course, you have other propaganda problems in those regards.
Oh yeah,
ellipses, which I will not mention. Which are better than end-stage capitalism.
Yeah, I was thinking, what would you say though to some people who would say maybe that these views that all these companies deal in these situations nefariously is that it may be like a conspiracy theory to believe that they are intentionally nefarious, trying to sort of reduce education in order to sell an idea. What would you say to that?
Yeah, just because it sounds like a conspiracy theory doesn't mean it's not true. And I'm not saying not all the corporations are conspiring. I mean, this is all chaotically piecemeal, right? DuPont doesn't want you looking into them, so DuPont specifically goes and defunds certain scientific programs that were looking like they were going to look into them. The cigarette industry doesn't want you looking into them, so they go and defund certain colleges with scientific bents that look like they're going to look into them, and they fund other ones that are not. So it's by aggregate. So I'm not saying they all get together in some Illuminati meeting and say, this month, who are we going to defund? That doesn't happen. At least I don't think it does. It doesn't need to be like that. They all know the playbook because the logic of making money most efficiently dictates what the playbook is. And they all, over time, invariably, the companies that still persist are the most lean, the most efficient, making money machines the human species has ever seen. Mm-hmm. And so they learn either by talking to each other, and they see what each other are doing, or they learn by it themselves. This is the way we need to operate. This is the way that public relations operates. And it was literally a Bernaysian playbook. Again, watch The Century of the South. Yeah. Another really good history of the United States to see how this came to be is Oliver Stone's Untold History of America. It's on Netflix right now. It's about World War II, but it very clearly shows how all these capitalistic bents were well established in America, even at that time, and how the corporations were just monopolizing on the war, on anything they can monopolize on to make money, because they are addicts. They are money addicts. These corporations are run by money addicts. Think of Jeff Bezos. He's about to hit $1 trillion. Who needs $1 trillion Can I swear on your podcast? Who needs $1 trillion fucking dollars, right? All these guys, I've studied the psychological profiles of some of these CEOs, and they are all addicts. They're addicted to money. They're addicted to the power. It's a game to them to see how much more money they can make once they've already got a few $100 billion, right? That's one kind. And the other kind feels guilty, the philanthropist, right? Jack Dorsey, a little bit. He started to feel a little bit guilty. Bill Gates, right, is now doing a lot of work in philanthropy. He realized the monster he made with Microsoft on the earlier 90s monopolies. And him and his wife turned face there, right? Zuckerberg pretends to be a philanthropist, putting out that little letter with his wife out there, but he's really not at the end of the day. He's not willing to make any concrete changes to his system. Facebook has really failed us lately. And so am I saying you should boycott Facebook and Google? No, you can't. Don't boycott Walmart. That is an argument that the rich have put out there. Well, if you don't like it, leave. That doesn't solve anything. If one person out of 10 billion or whatever it is, one person out of 10 million leave, that doesn't hurt them in any way, shape, or form. They don't care. They'll sell to you with one of their shadow corporations in some other way, right? They're going to get you somewhere, right? You know, so if you don't buy from the Amazon site, you're probably buying from an Amazon affiliate. You know, if they're the only one who has that product, they're the only person you could buy from.
Oh yeah.
So education is the solution, but it has to be on the ground level in small podcasts like this. People who know what's going on have to surreptitiously go to smaller podcasts and tell an audience of 30, and then that 30 tells 30 more, and that 99 or whatever that is, 30 times 30, that 900, whatever that is, tells 900 more. I'm not a math professor, I'm a philosophy professor. And they go on and on and on. Like, this is the way to surreptitiously do it while the system is still open. You can still, for example, I was doing this other podcast the other day, and it was during the riots. And the riots are still going on in the States, by the way, just nobody ever hears about it anymore. Now they're being totally pepper sprayed and tear gassed. But nobody hears about it anymore because, old news. I said, that's the problem with protests. They don't work, right? They're tactically dangerous. People of color get targeted. People lose eyes when tear gas cans hit their face. You know, it's not a good scene. So I said, instead of taking the 20, while the system is still open, because the rich want it as open as possible to sell to us in every which way that is, so it's flexible for them. They keep the advertising system relatively affordable and open. So we have to use that. We have to use the system against them. So I said, instead of going to a protest and spending $20 at Starbucks, which you're helping the corporations at that point, by the way, good for you. Way to rage against the machine by using the machine. Fucking idiots. Instead of going to a protest, take that $20 and buy a targeted ad for all the Fox News viewers on Facebook. And the ad should run something like this. Controversy. Conservative scientist admits climate change is real. And then link that to an actual scientific article that talks about climate change and jam that medicine right down the throat of all the Fox News viewers. And only $20, you know, they pay per view at that point. That's going to cost about $2 of that kind of ad. So you'll get 10 people to see it, but at least you will have reached 10 people. 10 people will go, what? My side thinks it's real now? And they'll click it. And if you word it right, they're going to think it's okay for them to believe it, and then they're going to believe it. And then you've healed 10 out of the, whatever it is, 500 million we need to heal. Little bits like this are how we're going to change the education of people. And it's going to be done slowly over time. And we have to do it we have to avoid the sleeping dragons, to use the quote. We have to do it under the watch of the rich, because they will pivot. They can pivot in a moment. And then we have to shore up the holes in our system. Facebook needs to be shored up so that Russia can't put their propaganda anymore and further inflame the left and the right. Facebook also has to police political ads and police untruths on their system. That has to be officially mandated. To do that, we have to have enough political will to sadly vote in a Democrat in the United States, because for some stupid reason, the United States now rules the world digitally because the richest digital companies are American. And even though everyone in the world uses it, no one else in the world has any influence over it, right? The other countries in the world should literally ban Facebook and Google in their countries until they comply with these. Like Canada should say, sorry, there's no longer a Google and there's no longer a Facebook in any Canadian IP address. No one in Canada can reach this anymore. And they should hire Google back to make a government-mandated, fair, changeable, democratic, liberal democratic search engine. that when you go to canadasearch.com, you get, it's run by Google because they're the best people at running it. You would waste billions of dollars trying to recreate what Google did. Just ban Google and then hire them back to make it for whatever $10 billion, and then pay them to do it, and then they'll do the search engine, and they could do it in a week. They're like, oh, okay, what do you want? Because they're very good at changing their search algorithms. They could change it for you in a week. And then Canada would have a free, and UK should do the same thing, right? All these countries need to take their collective power and say, no digital autocracies. We need to make these changes and differences. So political changes need to happen. Educational changes need to happen. But the first thing is we need to educate everybody to what these problems are.
Do you think that, just to your point on sort of having a government run, like Google sort of thing, do you think that, or do you not think that the corruption within governments could then come into play if they are then hiring Google and somewhat controlling what they're doing for their country?
No, you're absolutely right. That's why in my TEDx talk, I recommend that it should be a not-for-profit organization. Right. I recommend that that Wikipedia should actually buy Google. And Wikipedia, a not-for-profit organization, should run the search for not-for-profit reasons. So there's no profit incentive for them to change what the search results say. Yeah. And even if it ended up being the exact same search algorithms that Google already does, maybe the herd likes buying from big brands. It doesn't like mom and pops. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But at least we have control of it. And every 4 years is a digital referendum. Everyone can vote on their phone and say, do you like the search settings the way they are? Yep, I like them. Or nope, it's not fair enough to this. Or nope. When I search unprofessional haircut in Google, it shows a bunch of people of color. When I search professional haircut in Google, it shows a bunch of white people. This is not cool. And then they can make those changes. Right now, Google is only making those changes out of fear, but that fear of the mob only goes so far and only does so much. Look at the terrible things happening in the United States, and look at how little has come of it. What sweeping change across the United States has happened after George Floyd's murder and all those other murders? Nothing. Not a goddamn thing. All that happened is that Starbucks and a bunch of corporations made a lot more money, and coronavirus spread a whole lot more. Congratulations. Mm. I'm all for rebellion. I am all for changing the system because it's fucking broken, but not in a dumb way. But that's the problem, is that the corporations have made us all dumb.
Do you think there's any government, because you said we've got to find a government that's strong enough to uphold these sort of measures to stop end-stage capitalism really taking hold? Do you think there's any governments out there that are doing anything like close to what you would imagine is the way we should go? Or if it's not even possible for governments as we know them to become strong enough to uphold these sort of views?
Yes, China and Russia. China and Russia each have their own search system because they saw this problem from the very beginning. Right? China and Russia knew from the very beginning that this is not an innocent search engine, that this is how you control the flow of information. And so they both have their own Yandex and Baidu. They both have their own search engines that they autocratically control. Not great examples, because those are not the greatest actors, right? But yeah, they fully understood what this problem was.
But so they don't have, they could be seen as nefarious, in their use of...
rightfully so. They should be seen as nefarious.
Yeah, so essentially there are countries that are strong enough to uphold it, but not who are also morally just, if you could even use that term.
I think New Zealand and Canada have demonstrated with their response to coronavirus that they have the moral will to take such a move, right, if they only understood the problem. Trudeau and the Prime Minister of New Zealand, whose name escapes me, they're both younger. They probably would understand the problem. Give me 20 minutes with either.
Yeah, you think?
I'd give it my best shot. But I mean, I don't see why. I mean, it would make so much money for New Zealand or Canada to do it, right? It would take money away from Google. Who cares? What's Google going to do? They're going to whine and complain. Sorry. The European Union has been suing Google from like the early 2000s, billions and billions of dollars because of all these monopolistic tactics. Instead of suing Google with their legal team, they should say, no, we're banning you. That's it. It's illegal here. Any server farm in this country which is serving data from Google.com or any of its affiliates will get fined $1 million. They will be shut off in that country. It's a move you could do like that. It takes no say from Google. And then you hire Google back. If Google says, no, fine, hire Microsoft. Bing's not that bad. Hire Microsoft to make it and then make a search engine. At the very least, you no longer have that problem. Same thing with Facebook. Now, I agree. The dumb, the ugly, silly, stupid search engine and social engine that they would make from any given corporation would probably be terrible.
Oh, yeah.
I agree. But it's better than where we are now. You can have TikTok, which is Chinese made and operated, by the way. Mm-hmm. You can have TikTok. You can have Facebook with all your sexy likes and plus ones and every other stupid thing you can do on there. And the world will end. Or you can have a world that continues living and you don't have the left and the right totally bifurcated. You don't have hate speech and total bald-faced lies being popular online. You don't have people believing the coronavirus is a hoax. You don't have deaths from that. Literal deaths happen because of that. You don't have a group of people who literally thinks that Hillary Clinton, a grandma, was running a sex ring under a fucking pizza store.
Pizzagate.
Exactly. That doesn't happen in that system. Yeah, it's slower. Yeah, it's ugly. Yeah, it's got the Canadian flag all over it. I'm going to puke. Blah. Yes, it plays "Oh Canada" every time you log into it. I'm going to vomit. But at the same time, you don't have these problems. The left and right know what truths they're talking about, and it's balanced, and the people have control of it, which is the way it's supposed to be. The only way it will be maintained over time. The only way. Because here's the problem with end-stage capitalism. It ends in destruction. It ends in the collapse of the society. The third world and second world pockets blow up to include the entire country, except for this house here and that of this billionaire here, and this house of that billionaire there. We all become second or third world citizens. And when climate change rolls around, I assure you, that's exactly what's going to happen. And climate change is a direct result of end-stage capitalism, of unrepentant selling the bricks of the house as it's burning down underneath it capitalism. And that's exactly what they do. And everybody knows that, right? The housing crisis proves that beyond a shadow of a doubt. They will sell a product that's going to burn, crash, and burn. The oil industry proves that. They will sell oil until we're all dead because they don't care, because they are addicts.
Now, how much of this do you think is like due to just people's subconscious and the, I don't know, the philosophy of the world we're living, and less sort of like run by the companies, but this is the way the human race wants to go forever. We've wanted to consume, or we've wanted to keep doing these things, and we don't have the brain power to we have the brain power to analyze these things from a abstract point of view, like we do, like we're talking about now. But do we actually have the brain power to put that in motion in our lives and stop using these things? Or really, do we just want to, eat ourselves to death?
You guys are hitting all the high points. Like that is exactly the right thing to ask, right? So I can tell the UK still has some good education when you guys went through, because you're asking all the right questions. The answer is yes. The answer is both. Like, right? That's not mutually exclusive, right? You're absolutely right. And this goes all the way back to Plato. Philosophers, ever since the beginning of time, have realized, when you put these human beings together, they act in very peculiar ways. They will eat, fuck, and fight until they're all dead, and they don't want to do a lot of planning. They don't seem to want to plan very well. They seem to want to do the other thing. And it completely comes down to training and education, right? We need to be educated to be rational in that pejorative sense. We need to be educated to have one little McDonald's cheeseburger here and there, reward yourself here and there, but not every meal of every day, right? And because there's no moral truth anymore, there's nothing stopping from people doing that. Why? Why shouldn't I eat myself to death? There's nihilism. Thanks, Nietzsche. There's nihilism. That nothing matters anymore. Why shouldn't I eat myself to death? It's only my limbic system. The only thing that matters is my limbic system. You know why everyone's shooting each other in the United States? Because there's no way to win an argument anymore. There's no truth. How can you win an argument? If there's no truth and the neocortex is out of play, then in terms of the limbic system, and I'm speaking as a graduate level educated psychologist at this point, the only way to win an argument, quote unquote, is whoever screams the loudest. Whoever's the most emotional and screams the loudest and makes the most poignant point is the one who wins. And so the guy who goes crazy, shoots 40 people and shoots himself in the head, well, that's one damn poignant way of making your point, that you were disgruntled.
Yeah. I was actually recently listening to listening to some people discuss Aristotle's Rhetoric, and they were explaining how, arguments can be won with fact, which is the best way to win them, or with rhetoric. And rhetoric can also be just boiled down to linking various maxims together that sound right but don't end up being right. And I feel like that's where we're at when we're listening to politicians who will just sort of say something. Like their example was from The Big Lebowski. He's just saying, like, he's getting beaten up and he's like, do I look like a married man? The toilet seat's up. And the reason that works so well is because there's two things that you haven't said there that you assume that if you were married, then you'd have to put a toilet seat up, and therefore that works. But sort of in a political sphere, people would use that. They would say, this is where we're at, and then this is how we got there, but not necessarily. They're kind of maxims. They don't apply to everybody, and that's the rhetoric people go for rather than, facts.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. That is, it disgusts me as a philosopher. I literally puke in my mouth every time I hear a Trump supporter talking, a conservative pundit who's clearly been hired to just support Trump. The rank, bald-faced rhetorical nonsense that comes out of their mouths that gets accepted. Like it's let. Like I don't advocate physical violence, but but like, how could you not slap this person in the face? Like, how is it even allowed? I fantasized about having a podcast where it was a debate show where I was the referee, and there'd be a left-wing arguer and a right-wing arguer. And the second any one of them said any logical fallacy, I mute their mic and say, you forfeited the rest of your time because that was a fallacy. Blah. You don't even know what fallacies are anymore. That was a rhetorical fallacy. Blah. And the other side now gets to talk more.
Mm-hmm.
If only I knew enough left-wing and right-wing people, because the left and right don't talk anymore. It would be my cousin Stefan from Facebook all the time trying to defend the right and the conspiracy theories he said. Coronavirus is a hoax. Sorry, Stefan, I've had to mute you again. It's going to be a lovely Thanksgiving when I see you. So education is the only solution. And it has to be because they have the universities, not totally, most of them. There's plenty of universities over in Europe that are still free and teaching staff that are not even in the grips of postmodernism, because postmodernism was a fad like 100 years ago in Europe, and it passes through the digestive system of academia, which the brain and the mouth and the smarts happen in Europe. They filter through the United States, gets picked up by corporations there, if corporations can use it. And corporations were like, can we use rhetoric? You better believe we can. Thank you very much for postmodernism. And then goes to the ass end of academia and out the butthole, which is Canada. And then the little turds of postmodernism get shot out there. So that's what I had to deal with when I was doing my master's and PhD, was the turds of postmodernism, which is kind of ironic because even the people that they quote don't even believe what they say they believe anymore. Europe has moved on from postmodernism to neo-modernism and all different weird kind of crazy stuff. They've basically gone back to the ancients. They've basically gone back to Plato and that era, and they're trying to remine what's going on there. So the solution is education on all levels. And quite frankly, it's kind of insightful to think that that's the solution to every human problem, right? Every human problem is solved by education. This person's having a heart attack, you better know CPR. Got to do your taxes, better learn how that works. Education is the solution to every problem, and it's been so denigrated in so many different ways. And that's the only way that the human species becomes wise enough to survive the next century.
What I sort of, looking at the situation for me, what I struggle to see is a world where enough people come together and think that they have the power to to make these decisions, like you say, to not use Facebook or to not use Google, or to do the things that one person alone wouldn't necessarily think that they have the power to do. And also because obviously there are so many people who are so susceptible to fake news, and they're so susceptible to these see there's adverts, and there's constant consumption, constant buying. So like turning the heads of those people who are the people who are the main targets, I feel like is probably going to be the biggest challenge, because we're going to need as many people as possible to be aware of this and, like you say, to be educated in these areas in order to make any sort of difference.
Yeah, I don't know where that magic number is. I mean, I'm sure social psychology has studied it from a different perspective. Like my best guess is you need 1/3. So 33%. One person in a 3-person work group who's fully wise and knows about Plato's good and knows about optimality and knows that it's optimal to seek what's optimal and has no other biases. That's what you would need. I have good news and bad news. The good news is that the human species will get there. It's inevitable. If they survive, if we survive, we will get there. The bad news is it's going to take another Armageddon, a major world conflict, for that to happen, and for everyone to be so shell-shocked and so disgusted with what we were and what we did, like World War II. Another event like that, for us to be so disgusted with what we were and what we did, that they're ready for a brand new life philosophy. They're ready to radically change their life and political systems for the better. And so my mission is just to get enough noise at the ground level that my philosophy and my books I've written on this can survive this apocalypse that's coming with climate change. And it's coming.
Well,
and I'm not saying that the human species is going to die, like the whole thing's going to die. I hope not. We're just going to get our population greatly reduced. And the rest of the remaining population is going to be living in terrible third world conditions. So, but that philosophy for this future that Nietzsche predicted, his book was Beyond Good and Evil, a prelude for the philosophy of the future. So he wrote the prelude, I wrote the main piece. That needs to be, with all due humility of how egotistical I'm sounding right now, quite frankly, that philosophy or something like it. Someone else can say it fine. I said it better, but someone else can say it. That happens all the time, right? Like physicists 50 years ago talked about the Higgs boson and no one knew, and then some other guy talks about it, and then that happens all the time. I need to make enough noise at the ground level on podcasts like this that enough people recognize who I was and knew who I was, and I have enough cult followers. Because we're going to seem like a cult right now, because the middle is so far away from the left and right, we seem like we're the weird ones. That people remember, oh yeah, Josh had a solution to this problem, and they go back and read what I said, and something like that gets implemented.
So something you said there reminded me of a quote of, do you know Adam Curtis, the documentary maker?
Not off the top of my head.
If anyone gets a chance, they should watch HyperNormalization by Adam Curtis. I think that's what it's called. And,
interesting.
It's an incredible documentary looking at sort of consumerism and how we got to the stage, particularly. How we got to particularly with Donald Trump, and he says that people don't really want a revolution. That a revolution comes with sort of backbreaking life changes that leave people with basically nothing, and having to rebuild up from there. Essentially, what people want is everybody to be a little bit nicer to each other. Which
no, you're totally right, and it's such a. Again, you guys are hitting all the high points. You're absolutely right. I mean, revolution is like a street fight. I don't know how many street fights you guys have been. I've been in too many. I mean, they're not pleasant, even if you win. It's even if you come out on top, it's usually not pleasant, right? Your whole night's ruined, that's for sure. It is hard work. And people, this is the exact influence of what postmodernism does to the left, to what Nietzsche called the weak. They want everyone to be weak like them. They want it all to be empathy. They want everyone to be nice to each other. And that's currently on the left what's winning. But the problem with that is that makes the right, the strong, quote unquote, these are Nietzsche's terms, the strong, it makes them, you wag your finger in their face too long and you get a Trump. That's what happens. You wag your finger in their face too long and they say coronavirus is a hoax. Don't tell me to wear a mask. And serious social problems happen. Here's what my brothers and sisters on the left don't realize. The right never goes away.
No.
You don't wag your finger at enough people and tell them to be woke, and then suddenly there's no right wing anymore.
Yeah.
That's fucking ridiculous. You have to learn, I'm sorry, but we have to learn to talk to those people and get through to them. If we cannot get through to them, the world will literally self-destruct given enough time.
Yeah, yeah. Even I'm reading a little bit on Alan Watts at the moment, and he always says that, you know, it's a balance, that the left and right have to exist in perfect opposition. The further they go away from each other,
Mhm.
the further one decides to go away from the other, the further the other has to go away to balance it. The middle has to be in the middle. So unless we come together, there's no way of actually sorting that out.
And that's exactly how the Second World War happened, by the way.
Yes.
Weimar Republic was extremely left-leaning,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it was because of the right wing's, the ever-present strong / right-wing presence, and the Machiavelli called them the great, I'll call them the rich. It's the rich and powerful on the right side, influencing their herd, their mass of right-wing mob, that metastasizes into a cancer, so angry and so bitter and so morally indignant at what these left-wing empathic snowflakes are doing, that literally violence erupts. And it did in the Weimar Republic, it has in the States. If they keep going in this direction, there will be another war.
Yeah.
It is the only solution. The only good thing about it, there's one benefit to the rich being so powerful and controlling everything, is that the military-industrial complex has become so scientifically advanced from your common Michigan militia carrying an AR-4, right? Those are very powerful, automatic rifles that I believe they still cannot be fully automatic in the States. I think they said to be semi-automatic. Regardless, if you think for a second that some jackass with an automatic rifle is going to take on a modern military machine like China or India or the United States, you've got another thing coming. They will obliterate you with artillery from UAVs from hundreds of miles away. You'll never even see them, right?
Yes.
So the only good thing about a massive war like that happening is that it has to be a rich of another nation state. The rich of China need to decide it's worth their while to take on the rich of America. The rich of Russia need to decide it's worth their while to take on the rich of America. And luckily right now, that would be too contradictive to making money.
So yeah, sorry, go on.
So luckily there won't be any big global war like that. So democracy will not die in a scream. It'll just die in a fizzle. We'll all just become completely digital wage slaves, totally hopelessly enslaved to our digital devices and with our groupthink, the groupthink of the left and the groupthink of the right. And it's Brave New World in 1984 wrapped into one. It exactly happened, just not quite the way they thought it would. And no one will be able to think differently in any of these shapes or forms. It literally has to be a ground roots evolution. It can't be a revolution. It has to be an evolution in the sense that the messages that we're talking about here get out to enough people to make them to get into the political actors and the CEO. We need to put. I'm going to call them the new philosophers, because that's what Nietzsche called them, who understand everything we just talked about and know what the solution is of seeking optimality and the good. We need to put these new philosophers in the seats of of corporations. We need to put these new philosophers in the seats of politics. And that's going to take another 20, 30 years.
And do you think it's going to happen?
I think it's going to happen because I think climate change is going to make us hurt so bad that we're going to be dying for another solution.
Right.
But I don't think it's going to happen before climate change. So that's going to be 30 years. The sun is currently in a 30-year low. The UV output of the sun has been decreased. The sunspots have been decreased. And so scientists predict we're in a 30-year low. Normally, this would cause a mini ice age. But because of the greenhouse gas effect already, it'll probably stay about the same. But as soon as 30 years are up, large portions of the planet that are currently habitable will be quickly rendered inhabitable. The middle of America will be as hot as the Sahara. That's 50 degrees Celsius on a good day. It's 100 degrees Fahrenheit for any Americans listening. that is functionally uninhabitable. The water table in the whole southeast of Florida, Georgia, will become completely polluted and uninhabitable. It doesn't matter if the seawater only rises 6 inches or a foot. It's that the brackish water seeps into sewage water and makes the water table, pollutes the water table. So that's going to either people can't live there anymore, or they're going to be incredibly sick on a regular basis, just like, people in Flint, Michigan are incredibly sick on a regular basis. That's why I said, don't think of it as don't think of it as a movie. Movies are the worst, my worst nightmare and enemy. Don't think of it like a movie. It's not going to be like Mad Max. It's just going to be how things are now, but you're not a first world country anymore. You're a third world country. Think of how people live in Fallujah. Think of how they live over in Baghdad. There will be ironclad monotheisms, just Christian this time, not Arabic. And they will be interrupting the rights of everybody as they currently are. No abortion, no nothing they're not against. And you'll be dirt poor. There'll be no access to medicine, no access to doctors. And your basic civil services will interrupt on a monthly basis. You'll have no money to get out. You'll have no money to leave. You'll have no money to go anywhere. So just think that's what climate change is going to do to currently first world areas, which are pretty and nice and well kept. And there's a Starbucks, and you can, have sex on Tinder and all that. All that's going to go away, or largely going to go away. You can't indiscriminately have sex on Tinder when everyone there's 3 pandemics going simultaneously, and everyone has some brand new kind of gonorrhea because the antibiotics has now failed, right? So by hook or by crook, little bits here or there, the first world country becomes a third world country, and it just causes misery.
Do you think that this sort of forced change via catastrophe do you think there's not a chance that by all of the people who would struggle in a situation like that, struggling even more would give the richer even more power because they have what the poor need in a situation where we become a third world country? The rich are probably still going to be not as rich, but they're going to be the richest. So do you think they get more power in a situation like that? And we are still, we being, the lower class would be worse off.
Of course. Yeah, of course. I mean, right now it's right. No one in history could have predicted how science increases in power, but no one also in history, none of the philosophers I mentioned, could have ever predicted the difference in wealth between the lowest class and the highest class. The Athenian democracy wasn't that different. The nobles had more slaves and they were a little cleaner, but at the end of the day, they were shit grubbers, just like the poor were shit grubbers, right? They all had to grow their own food, and there wasn't that much difference between a noble and that day. Today, it's you don't even know. We don't even know who the richest people on the planet are. They don't even let us know. Right now, this is Illuminati. Like, this does get into like shady rich characters. We don't even get to know their names, who live on private islands, who make Epstein look like a saint. They could do whatever they want, and whoever they want, not to put too fine a point on it. Right, and that's the way they want to keep it. Because they're power addicts, right? Why would they ever want to change that? So, no, you're completely right. The other problem in the third world country that I didn't mention, think of Fallujah or Baghdad, is that they have no effective voting either, and the police are totally corrupt.
Yeah.
America's almost already there.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Imagine how bad gerrymandering will be and voter suppression will be in third world America. And when third world America doesn't have any money anymore, and when nation states don't matter anymore, because I tell people to think of it like this. Don't think of China as a country. Don't think of Russia as a country. Think of them as a corporation. The poor Russians and the poor Chinese. 99.9% of Russians and 99.9% of Chinese don't give a shit about us, don't think about us, don't care about us. They don't hate us. They're very friendly when you go over there. They're like, hey, someone new. They're human beings like everybody else. It's the rich. It's not Russia, the country. That's the airs it puts on. It's a corporation. Putin runs a corporation. He's arguably one of the richest men in the world, if not the richest, because he doesn't report his wealth either, of course, because he's smart. And same thing with China. It's Xi Jinping and all those guys who are the richest Chinese people. Now, in 30 years, when it's third world America, and the country state really doesn't matter anymore, billions of Chinese are dying because all of the the seawater has been polluted too much with mercury, and the billions of tons of fish they eat are now too polluted to eat. Do not think for a second that there will not be major swapping of territory possible by whatever means, probably just from corporate decree, police actions, or wars, when half the planet is uninhabitable or not worth habiting, and you have got billions of people here or there who can't eat. Not that I think that China will not that I think the rich of China will care about their starving populace. I don't think that they will at all. I'm saying that don't think for a second that China is not going to own huge portions of the United States when it becomes so poor, when it becomes third world America. And don't think for a second that Russia is not going to literally own and run certain portions. Corporocratic Russia will literally own and run certain portions of the previously first world, of the previously free world, when they're no longer free and they're no longer so rich. The threat of a powerful military only works as long as you're going to fight. When all the decisions are corporocratic decisions made behind the scenes, there's no more fighting anymore. Fighting is bad for business, right? So when you're thinking of these countries as how they're going to be in 30 years after climate change, and corporocratic countries and third world America, they're going to make corporate deals. It's like, oh, okay, you want all the free water in Canada? Okay, here you go. Here you go, China. Just build a giant pipeline right across. Okay, like, don't think that they're not going to sell out their own people like that, because again, they're not citizens. They're users. They're users of our corporocratic system. Mm-hmm. Well, and they've got nothing. They have no leverage anymore. They're third world Canada and third world America. What leverage do they possibly have anymore? It's all going to have to be corporocratic deals. So I can see the video. You guys can't see me. I can see you. I can see I've thoroughly depressed the two of you.
Yeah, I was going to say,
And I know my job is done. Truth has been told.
a lot of the stuff, that you predict is going to happen in our lifetime. And, I was thinking that as we hit the hour mark and we think about wrapping this up, what's the positive sides of these things that you see that are that push you forward in life?
That's a really good question. So this is my mission to tell everybody about this. Do you guys know the myth of Cassandra?
Not well enough.
So Cassandra was the daughter of Priam, who was the king of Troy. And he was an egotistical bastard, as most kings are. And he knew that his walls were 20 feet thick and 40 feet high. And he knew it was almost impossible for the Greeks to siege the city. And so he very callously decided and magnanimously decided to grant Helen of Troy, who was stolen by his son Paris, either literally stolen or romantically stolen away, either one, because Menelaus was, of course, a jerk. And so Helen, whether she left him or not, or she was literally kidnapped and raped, who knows? But he let Helen of Troy stay. And Cassandra was Priam's daughter. Now, Cassandra was beautiful, and Apollo wanted to make love with her. But she spurned Apollo. She said, no, I don't want to make love with you. And so Apollo, being the jerk Greek god that he was, he blessed Cassandra with the ability of foresight. She could tell the future. But then he also cursed her that because she was a woman, no one would ever listen to her. So she told her father, the Greeks are going to destroy us. In 20 years, they will siege the city. Get her out of here. She's crazy. Ha, 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 dumb girl. Get her out of here. That kind of a deal, right? And they did. Of course, as we know, the myth of Troy, they did. They built the horse. They got in there, and they sacked the city, and it was laid to waste, and no one lived there anymore. It was rubble. I feel a little bit like Cassandra. I know it sounds egotistical, but from what I've been educated, it's so obvious. Everything I'm saying is like blatant, stare you in the face obvious from what I've studied. I had really good teachers who saw parts of it. I put the rest together. But because the world has become so bifurcated to the left and right, like I said, I sound like a madman, right? Because reality, the truth of what people think the truth is, has been molded by TV and movies so much to be away from what reality is, again, because that's the way the rich want it and the CIA want it. They don't understand how things actually work anymore. And so when I explain how things actually work, it's the rich folks. I sound like a madman, right? Bernie Sanders sounds like a madman. I sound like a madman. We sound like radicals when we're the ones who are saying the plain God's honest truth here from an impartial perspective. And so, but that's it. That's what puts the fire in my belly. Just to round out the tinfoil hat, I believe in reincarnation.
Yeah.
And I believe, just like you guys are musicians, so maybe you'll get this metaphor. When you guys do a cover, when you guys play Paint It Black,
yeah,
are you actually playing Paint It Black or not?
Well, I guess we're playing a replica.
You're trying, right? You're trying to get the melody exactly correct, right? Your instruments are in tune. You hit those notes, da 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 da, right? You hit that melody. That is an informational pattern, and that's all we are. We are informational patterns in stardust. Sagan was incorrect. We're not stardust. We're the patterns of the stardust and how they manifest over 4 dimensions over time, right? You put me in a blender, you lose absolutely not 1 ounce. You put me in a blender, I'm not alive and thinking anymore. You rearrange me back in another certain way, I'm thinking. It clearly is the configuration of the stardust. That's the thing that's living, right? So yes. I feel like why I'm fighting for this so hard is because whether reincarnation is true or not, the next philosopher is going to have to fix this, right? And again, it's going to sound egotistical that I'm saying I'm a genius like Plato and Nietzsche and all those guys, but I see what they're talking about, and I see what they were trying to fix. And the line of them that I mentioned before, we're trying to fix this. We've been trying to fix this for 2,400 years. We haven't gotten it right yet. The philosophers have failed, right? So it's my job to get it right. It's my job to say, okay, Nietzsche, I see what you were doing. You destroyed moral truths so you could rid us of the grip of ironclad monotheisms in the West. Fine, gotcha. Now we need to make a new theism because humans need theism. It doesn't have to be God, but it could be the good. It could be Plato's good. It could be what Plato talked about all the way back in 2,400 years ago, where he talked about the ideal, the good, the optimal. It's already what the medical sciences try to get. They try to make things better. It's their Hippocratic oath, right? Don't do no harm. Don't make it worse. Make it better. Why? Because better is better. You don't have to argue for that. I don't have to prove a God exists to you. Better is better because better is better. It's a truism that is true and practically useful, right? When you have to sleep on a friend's house, and he says, I know it's not ideal, but why did he say that to you? He already knows that he's supposed to seek the ideal because it's ideal. And he already knew to apologize when he missed it. Right? When he offers you the crappy sofa. He says, I know it's not ideal, mate, but he already knew that the ideal is what he's supposed to be seeking. No one had to teach him that. That's the moral truth. That's the goal we need to get to. That's what I need to educate everyone to. We didn't talk about it on this show because you want to talk about other stuff, but that's fine. That is the moral solution that we get everyone to. Optimality. It's the Hippocratic oath. It's what medicine already tries to do when it's not marred by money, right? And we see how far the world needs to go because when Fauci says everyone's going to die, what are you doing? He's ignoring. They only have 2 or 3 months of goodness in them, and then they want to go back to capitalism, and everyone wants their Starbucks and their fatty foods and whatnot. So that's what puts the fire under me. That's what puts the tension in my bow, to quote the Nietzsche, is I see the problem as it needs to be fixed, and I think I'm probably the only one, or one of the only ones. I'm trying not to be. I'm trying to make friends, right? I'm trying not to be the only one. I'm trying to tell other people, scream it from the walls of Troy, Father, this is what is happening, and make enough of a cult that will remember past the apocalypse, so that model could be tried, because it's the model that's going to save the human race.